world as we know it is coming undone.
Truer words have never been spoken. Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore is the third film in the Fantastic Beasts franchise and the 11th film in the Harry Potter universe. In this film, the gang from the first two Fantastic Beasts movies come back together in an attempt to stop Grindelwald from rising up to a position of power that would allow him to wage war on the muggles. After the disastrous previous film trying to overstuff the plot with enough story to fill a novel, I didn't have very high expectations for this film, despite enjoying the first film fine enough. This film, thankfully, isn't nearly as cluttered. The plot is at least condensed enough to fill a film, and I feel like people who have been on board with these characters will enjoy this film enough. Sadly, I'm not on such a bandwagon. I think my biggest problem is that these characters don't have any kind of arc established. With Harry Potter himself, they established his arc from the beginning. He was told he was a wizard, you knew he was going to Hogwarts for 7 years, and throughout that 7 years you saw that progress towards his climactic battle with Voldemort. With Fantastic Beasts, I don't really get the sense that they intended to make this an ongoing series. The first film was an enjoyable enough solo fantasy experience, and I don't really get the feeling that that was intended to be anything else. Clearly these sequels keep coming about not because J.K. Rowling has more stories to tell, but because the studio demands it. If you replace this group of people with any other group of wizards and witches, it would work just as well. Or, perhaps even better, because honestly, these characters just aren't that interesting. Dan Fogler's character, Jacob, is probably the most lively character out of all of them, as well as the only one with an arc. Second place would probably be Jude Law as Dumbledore, but even he isn't given a whole lot to do. Watching this film, Eddie Redmayne came off as incredibly stiff and lifeless, and I couldn't put my finger on what worked about him before and what didn't work here. But looking back at the first film, the two biggest problems I've found are, one, that he doesn't get a ton of interactions with beasts in here, whereas the first film made that virtually the whole focus. And two, his character, again, feels increasingly out of place. Why does this mystical zoologist need to get involved with this political corruption plot? And for that matter, why the heck are we dealing with political corruption to begin with? At what point did the fans start demanding a story where a group of wizards and witches stop the bad guys from rigging an election? It feels less like a Harry Potter prequel and more like a Star Wars prequel. You can tell the series is running out of stories to tell, and it always bugs me when a studio basically runs a franchise dry until it stops making money, instead of just letting a series end on the high note that it wrapped up on. The last thing I want to talk about here is the visuals. The earlier Harry Potter movies are some of the most gorgeous, colorful, vibrant films I've seen, and we basically get none of that here. This film just looks dull and bleak, mostly having a color scheme of gray, with most of the quote-unquote spells involving people blasting each other repeatedly. There's an occasional imaginative spell, and maybe one or two neat-looking creatures, but nothing spellbinding, so to speak. Most of the pretty visuals are in the end credits, and that's not a good sign. Hardcore Harry Potter fans may get into this film fine as it's at least smoother and less cluttered than the previous film, but after 11 movies, the franchise is simply running out of directions to take, and it may be time to put the series to rest. I give this film a 4 out of 10, and most likely won't be checking out any future films.